What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy. That's Joe. This is the Race Day Rundown, and man, this is going to be one action-packed race weekend. Could be one of the best race weekends we have all year outside of the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600. Got a lot to unpack, Joe. But before we get into all of that, let's just let everyone know we have both NASCAR free contests that you can join. We also have an F1 free contest that you can join. We're just here to have some fun. We're going to be getting into some drivers here in a little bit, and we're going to be going over their impact scores. We will have the full list in our race guide. The link will be down below for that. We also have some what we call our garage thoughts. That's going to be the full data spectrum. So if you want to dive into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of numbers, you can do that. Outside of all that promo, Joe, where would you like to start this weekend? Because, man, there is so much to get to. It's Throwback weekend, one of the best weekends in NASCAR.
And that's what I love about it, is this is one of those iconic things that we get to experience. And being a lifelong NASCAR fan, the throwback schemes to me is everything. I love it. We've got some examples here on the front that we just happened to come across in our old stash of stuff that I've had since I've been a little kid. So to me, that's what I love about this weekend, the history. You see it right there. Too Tough to Tame. This is what NASCAR is about. We got so spoiled and lucky having this event to get things kicked off post-COVID. We had 3 races here. I think people kind of got in a lull by the time we were done with that. So now I think this is really the staple we're looking for this week, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, and it just always seems to somehow produce a great race, because this track is very old and it wears your tires out like quickly. After like 3 laps, you're already asking if you can come in for a pit stop. I think we're going to see a lot of strategy in this race, which makes playing different events or just watching the race for fun, it just makes it so entertaining because there's so many options. These guys will have enough tires to make different moves here and there. Obviously, the stages are going to make things interesting, but it just seems like this track, just how it is, it always produces a great race. I expect nothing less this weekend. I don't think I'll be disappointed. I hope I'm not. But it will be hard to be watching every lap because we also have F1 back in America. They are in Miami. I've been very excited about this race. I know you have too. I don't know how this happened, but now they are starting basically the exact same time. So we're in a little bit of a dilemma. We're going to be focusing mostly on NASCAR, though, because that's what we're the best at. And we'll touch on a little F1, I think, towards the end. But as just a fan of racing, man, I'm getting a workout Sunday, just going back and forth, because we're in for a great show, I think, for both races.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be fun. I'm more leaning the NASCAR experience possibly the whole time. I might go record F1 and catch it on the in the evening whenever I'm relaxing, catching up on the stuff whenever I'm kicking back later in that night. But for the most part, I want to take in the NASCAR experience, get out all the full emotion of everything that's going on after seeing how many things have taken place in the realm of the history of the sport. I like that we're having a couple different broadcasters come in, maybe spice things up with the Fox Sports crew. So I'm really excited to see how it plays out this weekend, and I think Darlington is just going to be a lot of fun for a lot of fans.
All right, so obviously I don't want to spend very much time at all, but I do want to touch on Dover. I thought was a really good race. Obviously, it got rained out on Sunday. We saw some racing, but it got pushed to Monday. I thought the racing was still really good. We saw Chase Elliott win. He was in the points lead. Now, obviously, grows that a little bit. Pretty entertaining race overall, which makes me a little bit even more excited coming into this race because obviously we saw a couple races. Honestly, I think it was mostly just the Martinsville race because even Richmond, although there was no passing for the lead necessarily, there was pit strategy. You had none of that really for Martinsville. So outside of Martinsville, I feel like this car's produced a pretty good show almost every race that we've had. So coming off of Dover, obviously a little bit of letdown with the rain delay, but great showing. We saw a lot of racy cars again. I think we got some good stuff right. There was obviously a few things that we're going to miss on.
But I think you're right. Really, I think the strategy is what we got to experience last week for how this season might progress. And we saw people take opportunities and really take advantage of it. And I really think that's where we see that progression continue at a track like this. Can some of these teams that have been dominant continue to that dominance like a Chase Elliott, or do we see guys that have struggled continue to struggle like Denny Hamlin? Last week's example, we talked about it multiple times and different angles that you could approach it at. I think this week...
No other team shoots themselves in the foot more than the 11 team, it seems like. They were dominating that race. They were going to more than likely win that race. And then as Denny Hamlin is literally leaving pit road, the wheel is falling off. The tire is passing the car. I mean, that pretty much sums up the 11 teams' season so far. They had a little issue in practice I think we'll touch on when we get to Denny Hamlin. But let's set up Darlington. Let's set up this race. This used to be the Southern 500 Throwback. This is a shorter race. You want to get into a little bit of how this race is going to break down.
Yeah, they've made it a 400-mile event, so it's shorter, taking in some of the entertainment value we get along with this. I'm excited for that. So the number of laps is 293, so that's a mile and a third. Going to be fun to watch because if you take a look at our race guide, we've got the track information that you can take a look at, see the banking and everything along those lines with the track information, and also see the shape of it. Get all the stuff that I'm going over right now because performance points, 205 of them, a little over 205 available. There's a lot of laps available to lead, fastest laps. You want those performance points in the DraftKings setting. Also, stages break down to 90, 95, and 108. Last time NASCAR was here, the Cup Series winner was Denny Hamlin.
And that was also the race that we saw Kyle Larson go video game mode and just send it into the wall and rim ride around, and not that close, but kind of close to potentially passing Hamlin. I mean, obviously the car was pretty much destroyed after that. Almost got him the win, though. He still finished second. Really entertaining race, and that was a playoff race. Just like we said earlier, this race has just produces so much entertainment because the tire fall off is incredible here. You mentioned how long these stages are. You're going to see guys doing different strategy, coming sooner, coming later. How will cautions fall? One thing I will point out, and obviously we'll have to touch on this when we get to them, but I'll kind of set it up. We're seeing Elliott and Kevin Harvick start from the rear because they both had essentially tires go down, and they didn't have that many. I think they had about 15, maybe 20 laps on their tires. Had tire issues going into the corner. Harvick missed qualifying, so he wasn't able to obviously make that qualifying attempt. Still had a fast car. They just had to change something underneath of it. I think it was the rear diffuser. He's in a great spot. Elliott, not so lucky. He actually destroyed his car. They are going to a backup. We saw this last week with William Byron, which early on in that race, if you guys did watch it, he found his way inside the top 10, was looking good. I mean, obviously we knew he was chalk. We were on him. Something happened where he actually didn't have that great of a finish, so that will be something to consider when we get to Chase Elliott. But I've already talked about this guy and Darlington. I would say at this point, almost Mr. Darlington. Kyle Larson comes in at 11,000, starting second. This guy has done everything but win here. Just phenomenal over the last few races. Almost got it done last year. Starting second, he's my favorite play out of anybody here because I think this is his race to lose. I really do believe. I think there's some great cars and some great plays on this slate, but I think Kyle Larson, if he doesn't win, I will be very, very, or if he does not dominate, I will be very, very surprised.
He's starting second. He's got an opportunity to pass Joey right then and there, get a lead, and just hold on to it. And that's what you're looking for. You need those guys, especially priced that high, to lead a lot of laps, get some fastest laps with that clean air, and establish some dominance early. So he's in a prime position to do that. He, like you said, has great track history here. The track facts in the race guide. This dude, in the 8-race example that we have, he's only got 5 races in this example, and he is dominating in almost every category, including the most laps led. And he was able to do that in 5 races. That's just wild. He has 608 laps led. Obviously, we're in a new generation of car. These cars have been, as we've seen already this year, a lot more parity. You can have some guys that haven't been in contention really play into the mix more than other years. So I think we see some of these guys that are a little bit lower priced have effect. But like we've talked about, you need those dominators, and you need to pick them wisely. And I think he's probably one of the best bets this week. 9.5 for me.
Yeah, I'm going to be at a 10 on Larson just because, and it's not even so much what Larson has done this year. He does have a win already, and he's had some really good finishes. Definitely not the Larson from 2021. But he is with Hendrick Motorsports, and they are on an absolute tear right now. I just think it's his turn. Again, he may not win, but if he does not lead 50, 100 laps, something like that, I mean, we have almost 300 laps here. I think it really is his to lose, but if nothing else, I do expect him to dominate. He looked great in practice. He looked great in qualifying. There wasn't anything that made me say, well, I'm not quite so sure. Like, no, they look dialed in, and they also have a great-looking car. The paint scheme looks solid. I'm all over Kyle Larson. Anything else you want to touch on before we move on to our next guy?
I think Chase Elliott, he's the opposite end of the spectrum this week. Like you mentioned, he's starting 34th. He has all the upside in the world for place differential. If he's able to be able to make his way through traffic, not getting any kind of situations that put him in a position where he's playing catch up, then he's going to pay dividends if he's able to get a position that he's really usually pretty good at this track. We've seen him have performances here where he's had dominating performances. Obviously, he's this year's points leader. I see a lot of upside with him. 9.5 for me.
I think Chase Elliott still has the ability to win this race. I'm not going to pick him as a race winner, but I do think he has the ability to still do that. This has been a very hit and miss track for him. We saw him back in 2020 when they ran here 3 times. He was the best car all night, would have won. Kyle Busch makes a slight error, dumps him. I think Hamlin ended up winning that race. But he's had some other races where he's not been so good, and the biggest concern, in my opinion, with Elliott is starting 34th. If that backup car is not dialed in good enough, and let's just say his teammate Larson, and he's got it dialed in, there's a chance he could go a lap down early, and then he's playing that game of trying to get back on the lead lap. I don't personally expect that to happen with a Hendrick car.
And I think we saw the prime example of William Byron's experience last week. He was in that backup experience. We didn't know how that would play out. He looked good early, but the result wasn't there. So there is a reason to be concerned. But overall, I think it's a solid play, especially with the positions available for him to move up. That is just place differential is huge.
It absolutely is. And then he still has the ability to get fastest laps too. Obviously, laps led are less likely unless, of course, pit strategy allows for that. But he doesn't have to do much to hit a solid value. So he will be very popular. I'm sure both him and Larson will be very popular. But I think a really solid play that you could pivot to get off of this Larson and Elliott chalk is the next guy, Martin Truex, 10,500, starting 4th. I'm going to be at a 9 on Truex. I'm not quite as high on him as Elliott because of the things we talked about, but won this race last year in the spring. Really, really good stats here. Also, I think outside of Denny Hamlin, what he did in his starting position really doesn't reflect his performance in practice. Toyotas and Joe Gibbs in particular look pretty stout this weekend. So maybe we see a little bit more dominant. We saw a little bit last week in Dover where, Hamlin led a lot of laps, looked like one of the better cars. Maybe this is Truex or maybe Kyle Busch, who we'll get to in a second. I personally don't see it playing out that way, but it doesn't mean that it can't. I think Truex is a nice option to go to because I don't think he'll be very highly owned.
Yeah, I like him too. I've given him a 9. He's in that right little range where if he can get some early laps led or lead laps throughout at some point, he's going to be able to pay off a price tag if he has a strong finishing position as well. So I do want some exposure to him because his stats really are pretty strong here. This is a good track for him. He's got the experience to be able to dial in his car as this race plays out. So I like them to be able to gain some strategy advantages. So I really like him a lot this week. But there are some drivers that his teammates, we're going to find out how they all stack up. But his teammate Denny Hamlin right there starting 22nd, 10,300 right there next to him on the salary board. A little bit cautious because of all the things that we've seen play out. Where's his head at right now? Like, is he mentally ready to go to bat? I'm sure he is. He's a professional, but you can't really describe how much chaos has been going on. It seems like week to week, it's just kind of a weird place. He's starting 22nd this week. It's going to be fun to watch how this plays out, but I'm at an 8.5 from a DraftKings perspective because I think starting 22nd, he's got a lot of potential to go up, but I wouldn't get too comfortable with him this week in a lot of builds.
Yeah, I think Denny Hamlin is probably the biggest risk-reward driver maybe on the slate because he's, I think, a 5-time winner here. He knows how to get around this place. It's Denny Hamlin, 47 Cup wins. Definitely knows how to do it. But this season has been so chaotic. Like when he won that race at Richmond, we were like, okay, yeah, obviously he's in the playoffs. And now after how a few things have transpired since then, we're like, well, this dude still has to finish top 30 in points. And after the last few weeks, he's not going the right way. I don't know what we're going to get with Denny Hamlin. I would expect a good showing. Like I said, they did look good in practice. They were mostly good in qualifying. You would think they'd get it together. They did think, after taking the checkered in the qualifying lap, they did think that they might have an engine like going out. Apparently, according to old Bob Pockrass, they are good. They just had to change something underneath, like some side skirts or underpanning or something. They're not too concerned about the motor, which is good. But the fact that they were concerned that it might be a motor still has me a little concerned. I think if you're going with them and he hits, you're going to be sitting obviously really, really pretty. But, man, it is definitely concerning what we've seen this year because it's not been one or two races. It's been most races that 11 team has been off. Pretty scary. I'm going to 8 on him. Someone I'm a little bit higher on, though, unless you had anything else on Denny Hamlin. Get to William Byron, 10,100. Starts 9th. 8.5 for me on William Byron. His track history doesn't necessarily back up saying like he'll have a good run, but man, he's been one of the best drivers all year. Again, Hendrick power. Wouldn't be surprised to see him make his way top 5, top 3. I still think Larson will be the guy who will lead the majority of the laps, but if it's not Larson, don't forget about Byron. He can definitely do it too. We've seen a lot of massive improvements from him. And then he also just signed an extension.
I was about to say he got a major payday.
He's sitting good right now.
And he is going to be hunting trophies, I think, from here on out. He knows he's got a solid backed ride for the first time in a little while that he's got a few years to look forward to. So I really am expecting William Byron to step up. I've given him an 8.5 this week. Not the best track for him, but, man, he's been learning, and I think that's something we talked about a lot last year, how we saw him develop, and he's just continuing to impress and show why Hendrick is so invested in him. We talked a lot about Hendrick, but man, I don't know how many other guys will give people opportunities like Rick Hendrick has, and there's only a couple guys that will take advantage of it and really put in the effort and work, and it's really awesome to see William Byron take advantage and be in a position where he is. And today, that hard work is paid off. So I really do think that there are ways for him to pay off that price tag this week. Being in the top 10 already helps, not really having to fight the traffic. If he has a really good day on the track, get a top 5, top 6. You're there almost in value if you get some fastest laps. I like him.
Yeah, you said, I mean, when we start seeing some of these older guys, these just icons of the sport start to retire, Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Truex, when we start seeing these guys start to retire, and over the next few years, we're going to continue, I think, to see William Byron really blossom and become just next level race car driver, because he just seems to approach the races maybe a little bit differently than some of these other people. I don't know if it's just because of the iRacing background. I'm not quite sure, but I think he's going to be one of these icons that we're going to see in the sport really emerge in the next 2 to 3 years.
And we're talking about
And
Throwback
he's in the
Weekend.
24,
We're
dude.
talking about that.
Come on.
Exactly. We're talking about Throwback Weekend and how Hendrick has really taken that and done a lot of things. And this is a fun example of them this week with the throwback to Jeff Gordon driving the 24 car. You and I both grew up big Gordon fans, so that's something that I'm looking forward to this week. There's a lot of paint schemes, but I enjoy that one.
All right, so we're both pretty high, 8.5 on William Byron. Let's get to the next guy, and we're going to have to add like a little caveat here to Kyle Busch. He's starting 5th, 9,900. Normally we wouldn't really talk about this, not really what the show's about, but it may affect you if you're playing Kyle Busch in your lineups or really liking him, because he's in a great spot to potentially dominate this race or at least be a really solid finisher. I mean, he didn't have to do a whole lot being under 10K, but there's a chance he may not race in this race. Him and his wife, Samantha, they are expecting their second child, I guess any moment now. So we have Trevor Bayne on standby. He is in the DraftKings salary. So if he were to get the call before the race starts, that's the guy to play if you want to go with 18. However, if he does take the green flag and then switches mid-race, however Trevor Bayne does will count towards Kyle Busch's points. Something to consider. Personally, I don't think it's going to come into play this weekend. Maybe next weekend at Kansas if they haven't had the trial during the week. Then we may be considering this a little bit more, but that is still something to consider because that's a lot of money to pay on a guy who, if you're not up to date on your lineups right before the race goes green, it could bite you. If it doesn't, I'm at 8.5 on Kyle Busch because he's been running pretty well most of the year.
Yeah, I'm at a 9. He's been really consistent, and this is not a bad track for him. I think he's somebody that you want to have in your lineups, being that he's starting 5th. He's like some of the other drivers we talked about in prime opportunity to really establish himself and be a dominator at some point in this race. So I do want to have some exposure to him. The next guy, Ross Chastain, has been a dominator in multiple times already. He is now priced at 9,700, starting 8th. I still like him, man. He's been leading laps, it seems like, every week. If he keeps it clean and gets good finishes consistently like he has, sure, he could have had a better finish last week, but hey, you take risk and it doesn't always pay off. But I like what he's done. I'm at a 9. I think he's a strong play still.
I'm going to be at a 9.5 on Chastain just because you would expect a team like Trackhouse, like, oh, they got hot, right? And then you might think they kind of fizzle out. But for some reason with Chastain, most of the year, maybe a couple races early, but I'd say most of the year he's been up front. Maybe he's made a few errors that cost him some track position, whatnot. But, man, especially over the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, him, that team, even his teammate Daniel Suarez has had some really good runs. But, man, Chastain's been on another level. Starting 8th, obviously there's a couple guys I like ahead of him a little bit more to dominate. But, again, pit strategy can change that. And Chastain has the added benefit that he ran the truck race. He actually ran really well until the very end. Doesn't really mean much for these cars, but just race laps, just getting familiar with the vehicles, tire wear, that kind of stuff. It only, in my opinion, helps Chastain. 9.5 for me.
You know what else can't hurt? He's driving the Coca-Cola Polar Bear #1 this weekend, Throwback. So
yep,
it's going to be cool. I'm excited to see that on the racetrack. I like him.
One of the best paint schemes.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's some great ones.
Trackhouse did it right. It's going to be a lot of fun. I really can't wait to see those cars on the track. It's going to be a throwback from my childhood for sure.
I'm a little bummed. A little quick side note, I don't know if you know this, but Justin Marks was supposed to drive the Skull Bandit car.
I saw that, yeah.
Before, but apparently America or whatever, we got some tobacco laws. They can't show that on TV anymore. But, man, that would have been cool. Forgive me because I don't remember the year of the car that they were going to run, but it's the original race car that he bought from Andy Petrie. Sweet looking race car.
Absolutely. That was awesome.
Bummed about that, but man, Trackhouse, other than that, they're killing it right now. Overall, they're killing it. A lot to like about Chastain this week. But another guy that I think you can look at, because he might be a little overpriced to some, Alex Bowman, 9,600. He starts 15th. Again, Hendrick power. Didn't look that bad at all that I saw in practice. Just didn't quite have the qualifying speed. I mean, lower ownership option. I like it. I'm at a 9 on Alex Bowman.
Yeah, I've given him a 9 too. I think he's somebody that can be a strong contender to be able to work his way up towards the front, and then that allows for that place differential we've talked about, stacking up some of those points. I think there's some strong value too based on our projections over on Prize Picks. We got the over there for me. They've got him at 40.5. I think he can best that.
Doesn't even have to do too much to best that.
Exactly. So if you want to take advantage of a promo code to get a 100% deposit match on your first $100, use the promo code Garage over there on Prize Picks, and that will get you some free money.
Absolutely. Always good to have free money. And Alex Bowman might be as close to free money as we can get this week. There are a few other drivers who, based on where Prize Picks currently has them, I like them there too. We'll get to a little bit more of that. But let's talk about the guy that you're sporting there. Ryan Blaney, 9,400, starting 7th. 8.5 for me. I thought I was going to be a little higher on him just because he has ran really good this year. Darlington, a little bit of a tougher track for him. Not something that he can't figure out or overcome with this new car. But, man, I was really surprised that he was able to make the top 10, or the top 5 in his group, I should say, to get that second round, because he was fighting a tough race car all practice. I don't know what we're going to get from him for the race. I know there's a lot of other good guys around him. I'm going to be at an 8.5 just because he's been so good this year, but I am a little concerned with Blaney.
Well, he's starting 7th. His teammate starting 1st, who has the pole. I think they get it dialed in. He's got more upside, in my opinion, than a lot of guys do with his price tag in that range. I've given him a 9. I think there's a lot of ways that you can fit him in and make him a staple in cash and GPP lineup, so I like him a lot.
His other teammate is starting 19th, just to be fair.
Hey, Penske power. But he's a rookie, too. Cindric is going to, I think, surprise some folks.
So a guy that I didn't actually plan on talking about this week until he went and got the pole. We already mentioned him. Joey Logano, 9,200, starting 1st. I'm at a 7.5. He could hit. Maybe they really got that car. I mean, it's certainly possible. They're kind of due for a really good run. If he is one of the dominators and get a good finish, 9,200, like that really opens the door to get those guys like Chase Elliott, guy we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, Kevin Harvick. These guys that are kind of expensive for that PD upside might be a great option, but personally, I just don't know if it's going to pay out for Logano.
Yeah, I've given him an 8 because he does have the advantage of starting on the pole. He's looked fast, but to me, having that first place pole position in DraftKings is not always ideal. You only have the ability to go down if you lose positions. Then you don't have that first place finish. It hurts a lot, and then you're going to have to make up the difference in performance points, and that's a whole different can of worms, because if you don't get that out of the gate and Larson leads a lot of laps, then your whole plan's shot to heck.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways that he could hurt you, but if he goes off and he dominates this at that discount, it could pay dividends for sure.
And we even have him getting some performance points, actually finishing really well, and based on our projections and Prize Picks' current projections, looks like a pretty solid under there. You know, it is still a little risky. But speaking of risk, I mentioned earlier, I think Hamlin is one of the highest risk to reward drivers. I think the second driver that would fit that category is Tyler Reddick, 9,000. We've seen him have kind of a terrible run the last couple weeks, but aside from that, he's been running really well most of the year. Had a lot of speed. You can almost count on him for getting those fastest laps and even some laps led. This track suits his driving style. He likes to ride the top, rim rider. But when you do that and you mess up just a tiny bit, you're right there. You can really damage your car. The bodies can take it. You don't have to worry about cut tires as much. But hit hard enough and you break like a toe link, something like that, you got to come to pit road. Now your lap's down. Your day's ruined. So I'm at a 9. I think Reddick could be one of those guys who could be a dominator even in this race if they got that setup right. But again, running that top, we even saw it some in the Xfinity race, it can bite you.
Yeah, I've given him an 8.5. I think he's in a position to really pay off that price tag because being in the top 10, we've talked about it with some of the other drivers, like you don't have to pass as many cars, and then therefore you're in a position already to be in a good finishing position at the end of the day if you don't screw it up. But strategy and speed is something that these guys have had issues with from time to time, but whenever they're on, they're on. And I don't want to miss the boat with him, so I want to have some exposure. I just don't want to go overboard because it is kind of risky. Kevin Harvick, though, he's starting 35th. He is 8,800. I think he's going to be probably chalk on chalk. I've given him a 9.5. Good reason. He's got a lot of upside. This is a good track for him. This year's been pretty solid for him progressing and trying to work his way towards another championship. I don't know if we see him do that, but this would be a great track for him to come from the back and really set the tone for Stuart Haas Racing and be something that we would look at a couple years ago and not be surprised about. If they're able to come out and do that this year and kind of show they're back and ready to come out swinging again, that'd be a huge difference maker for that team.
Yeah, it would really set them up nice for the summer races, which can be a little long and tedious at times, sometimes even for fans. But that's where you can really set yourself up nice for the playoffs.
And I don't think he necessarily wins, but like, what would that do for that team?
But here's to play a little bit of devil's advocate. We kind of said that about him last week at Dover, and I picked him to win. I really thought he was going to do well, and they just didn't have the performance. And he had very good stats there, even better than what he has here. But I mean, you can't deny over the last 8 races, he has 8 top 10s. That's big time, and obviously, I mean, we don't even have him projected to finish inside the top 10, and he's almost 6x. He hits the top 10, dude. He's gonna, even if he's chalk, he's gonna have to be in your lineup. So he's definitely a guy that you need to look at. But then to be fair, you have to think about the fact that he's in the same situation Elliott is. If for some reason they don't have that car dialed in right, or have a problem trying to pass some of these other cars early, get some damage, he's at risk of going a few laps down, or at least a lap down, and then playing that game trying to get back on the lead lap. That can really hurt his overall finish. If that doesn't happen, though, I mean, there's no reason why Kevin Harvick can't still finish top 15. That price, that starting position, that's really, really nice for your lineups, and you can still fit in guys like a Larson or Truex or however you want to approach it. And maybe you want to approach it with a guy like Austin Dillon, who will probably be super low owned. 8,500, he starts 14th. Now, I first wanted to talk about Dillon before qualifying. He qualified, got 14th. I was hoping for a little bit more PD of play here, so I'm going to be at a 7, not as high as obviously Harvick and some of these other guys. However, the fact that he will most likely be very low owned, and this is a race that could play into his racing experience. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time now. Dillon's not a bad play. This is not a bad track for him. Not a 10 by any means, but not a bad play.
Yeah, I've given him an 8 because I think if we would have had this conversation and probably had this conversation like 2-3 years ago, I wouldn't have been very confident in putting Austin Dillon in my lineup. But the last 2 years, I've really seen the progression of him as a race car driver and made me way more confident to roster him in a lot more situations that I was really hesitant to. And then the composite body and all these other things start to play into the factors that I'm looking at, because he can stick his nose out there, be a little bit more confident in his passing ability. It's just something that aligns a lot with him, and I like him in this position this week.
Now, someone who I was really hoping would be starting a little further back, but even where he's starting, I still love him. Eric Jones, 7,700, starting 11th. One of his, if it's not his best track, it's one of his best tracks. He does have a win here. Just seems to run really well, and we've seen him have really good runs this year already. I like Eric Jones a lot. I'm going to be at 8.5. If he was starting, 15th, 16th, that would probably be closer to like a 9.5. But obviously, there's a little concern there. But overall, I think he's a smash play on DraftKings. I think he's a smash play on Prize Picks as well for the over, at least where they currently have him. I'm sure this line will move the closer we get to race time because he is pretty stout here.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I've given him a 9. I like the over on Prize Picks. I think we both saw that and really liked that right out of the gate. And starting 11th, we've alluded to it a lot. Track position is going to be key. I think him being in that top 12 really allows him to really have an opportunity to establish himself, and we'll see if he has the speed to keep up in the long run. And I think if he's able to prove that, he could really pay off a nice price tag this weekend.
All right, so we're going to touch on one more driver. But obviously, if you want to see the full list of all the drivers in our DK Impact Score, that is in our race guide. Link is down below. The last guy I kind of want to touch on, and there's a lot of really good plays down here, but I kind of picked this guy before qualifying because I just saw where his price tag was at. Justin Haley, he's below 6K, 5,900. He is starting 29th, so there is some really nice PD upside. Not seeing the performance that I would have thought I might have seen early on in this year. They have struggled some, but they've been getting a little bit better. He doesn't have to do much to really pay off this price tag. For some of the other guys, I don't think I would go much lower than Justin Haley this week if I can avoid it. So he might be kind of the bottom for me, but 7.5 for me. I think there's a lot of upside with him and even his teammate this week, Daniel Hemrick.
Yeah, I've given him a 7.5 as well. I think Haley is in a position to really. We've seen him race in the top 10 multiple times already, and it's usually at events like this where you're not really expecting it. And so if he can get a finish in not even just right there at the top 20, like that's not doing a whole heck of a lot, and that's where he's priced is over 5x. So we can see that he's continuing to progress and learn. He's been a great super speedway racer, but he's really progressed a lot over the last couple of years. Again, I think he's somebody that you can look to in this lower tier to find some value.
All right, so touched on the drivers that we want to touch on. Let's get to who you think is going to win the race overall. I'll start. It is tough because there's a lot of guys that I could easily pick to win this, and this thing might be going smooth until the last couple laps. We get a late caution, and then chaos breaks out, which makes this pick a little less secure for me. But personally, I'm going to go with Kyle Larson. I know it's the obvious play, it's the chalk play or whatever, but it just seems like everything is just right there for him to take. He doesn't have to contend with Chase Elliott, at least early. Why not?
I like Martin Truex. I think he's going to come in and really staple his position with this season and take a win home for Team Gibbs. I think that's where we see him this weekend in Victory Lane.
All right, time to go. But I did mention this is F1 weekend as well. I don't have a whole lot to say. We haven't been able to do a bunch of studying and diving in too much of this. And plus, it's just a new track. We're here to be as good as possible. I'm mostly just going to be watching this race for fun. But I do want to pick race winners. I think you went first last time, so I'm going to go first this time. I'm going to go Charles Leclerc, which is chalk because he's got the pole. He's looked great. Best driver all year. But I will say if things get crazy, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's his sweet helmet. I think Lando Norris might be able to at least sneak in top, podium finish. But he's got a basketball helmet that looks so realistic. It looks really cool and didn't have the best qualifying effort, but has looked really good in practice from what I saw all weekend. Things could get crazy here. This is a tough track.
The track looks awesome. like I said, I want to be taking in the NASCAR experience. Let us know what you're taking in. Are you going to be witnessing or watching F1 and NASCAR at the same time? How are you going to take it in? But regardless, I think I'm going to go with Verstappen again. He's just, to me, he's too much like the Intimidator, Dale Earnhardt. I like his driving style. I'll have that race on a little bit later in the evening because, like I said, there's just too much action that's going to happen at the track, too tough to tame. I'm so excited for the historic aspect of everything behind it, too. This is going to be a fun weekend.
Absolutely going to be a great weekend of being lazy, watching fast cars go around in some type of circle shape. Anything else you want to touch on before we get out here? Because I think we've kind of hit everything. Again, links below to the full, for a race guide that's got the full impact scores. Don't forget, drop your DraftKings tag down below. Get in on our F1 contest. Get in on this throwback NASCAR contest. Other than that, man, this has been a lot of fun. I can't wait for how these races are going to play out. But that being said, let's get to it. Peace out, y'all.